Roger, go for deploy.
Alrighty, welcome back, listeners. This intro-outro right now, believe it or not, is coming to you live from Davao City in the Philippines. So I'm actually over here spending a week with my assistants, and I'm not quite sure if you can hear all these trucks and bikes and buses in the background, but it's typical mental Southeast Asian traffic right beside me. But anyway, yeah. So this show is a show with Rusty Young. So Rusty Young is the author of Marching Powder, one of the most epic books you'll ever read, and he is also owner of the greatest adventure radio podcast ever produced. I think episode 36 was Rusty's first show, and I routinely get asked which out of our first 120 shows is my favourite, and I will always tell people that Rusty Young, episode number 36, is indeed that show. So we're sitting down a second time with Rusty, had an epic chat. So Rusty's just released his second book called Colombiano, following a story of a young boy growing up in Colombia, and getting really, really good reviews, similar reviews to Marching Powder, right up there. So we talk a lot about his new book, and we also talk about a documentary that he did in recent times as well. So yeah, it's a real good chat and a real good catch up with Rusty. So you guys are going to love it. So this show though is brought to you by Audible, guys. So head to audibletrial.com/ADBF radio, and you can check out what they do there. You'll get 30 free days and one free audiobook. Guys, if you're not listening to audiobooks through Audible, you're really wasting a really good opportunity to be taking knowledge in there. I mean, knowledge is power. I don't want to sound like an idiot, but yeah, I mean, being able to learn, being able to take things in, upskill yourself while you're walking your dog, while you're cooking dinner, while you're shaving the hummus, it's just super important. So anyway, audibletrial.com/ADVF radio. We're also brought to you by Quash Creative, guys. Head to quashcreative.com and quote the code radio. You'll get a free SEO report or report on your current or existing brand. Quash Creative is a great friend of the show, Sean Marsh, and his team down there. He's the guy that put together our intro jingle on our podcast. He's also great with anything design related, anything web related. So head to quashcreative.com, use the code word radio. And we're also brought to you by Adventure Fit Travel, guys. Make sure you head to www.adventurefittravel.com, check out everything that we've got going on. At the moment, we have a few tickets left on our second Iceland trip in December. We've also got Hawaii that we just released. We've got Kokoda Track, an Australia mini trip, New Zealand. We've got a bunch of stuff going on. So head to adventurefittravel.com if you want to do epic things with epic people in epic locations. Then yeah, check us out. Use the code word radio there for 10% off as well. Anyway, here's the show.
Fun as well.
Oh, he's a fuck. At the end, I was like, mate, you got so much out of me.
Yeah, that's good.
Here with you guys is like hanging out with your mates.
Yeah,
and that's right. That's what you got to do.
Yeah.
With him, he's an older guy, very, very serious, very insightful, very focused. So I'm not like you guys aren't going to go so Rusty.
Yeah.
We're
in 1974.
Mate, I think
how was your childhood?
I think he's
Are we
not really.
Are we on air now?
We're on air. Yeah.
We're on air. Yeah.
I think he's not giving us the credit we're due. I don't think he told me. We have those questions in us, Rusty. We're professional. We're not old, but we are professional.
It's funny you should say that, Russ.
By
I know
professional,
how your childhood was.
Are we on the record now?
We're on the record. We're officially on the record.
Yep. I mean, we tell dick jokes.
Yeah. All of a sudden, yeah, that's true. Now it's very politically correct, and we are sitting here with Rusty Young. Rusty, how are you, my friend?
I'm very, very well. Enjoying Melbourne, the chilly air of Melbourne. Hanging out with my mate Bill and Tom.
Melbourne's where the does
my
suck.
friend.
Mates. Sorry, plural.
Yeah, mates. Yeah, it's not a Sydney term, Bill.
So, Rusty, what are you doing? So you're doing your press tour for Colombiano, right?
That's right. I'm at the back end of this long tour. It's been 4 weeks. I've travelled around the whole of Australia, and the final event is probably the biggest one, which is the Melbourne Writers' Festival with the director of the festival, Lisa Dempster.
I think my dad's going to that, actually. Isn't that like a fuck ton of riders going to that? Just technical term. Yeah, approximately fuck ton. No, that's a massive event, though, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I mean, any literary festival is always a big event, but Melbourne's pretty prestigious. Sydney has one as well. Lots of the states too, but yeah, really looking forward to it tomorrow.
So how's the book? How's the reception been? How's it all shaping up so far?
Look, the thing that's always worried me the most, or the thing that's been my greatest concern, has been like how Colombians going to react to it. And so far, the Colombian community in Australia and the few people overseas have read it have reacted really well. Getting some reader feedback. It's pretty slow because it's such a long book. This is I'm calling it a multicolored brick. Have you seen the book? It's just like this.
Yeah, you gave us a copy of it a year and a half ago.
No, that was half the book.
Yes, right.
It was just Columba.
It was good.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, the first letter was good. Oh, I enjoyed it. I gave it 5.
Yeah, cool.
So within the first week, it hit top 10 bestsellers in Australia. So it's sales are going well. That's not how I measure myself as a writer. It's do people actually like it? Get something from it, learn something from it. Become inspired. And I think that takes a long time to actually work out how readers react. Because in the first month or two of the publicity campaign, it's all about driving sales and doing publicity and being on TV and blah blah blah. And everyone goes, "Oh wow, wow, you're famous. You're in it's in the airports. It's in the book of the month and all these places." But for me, it's like at the end of the day, it's like when you read a book, it's you on your own, usually in bed, and just you and the writer. You're hearing someone's voice, and that's when you make your decision. It doesn't matter about all the hype.
Yeah, no, that's right. So Colombiano. So we talked about this whenever it was, 18 months ago when we caught up.
I think it was more like 12 months ago.
12 months ago.
Yeah. 18 months is a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, whenever it was. It was...
Not to get too technical, but...
Yeah, whenever it was. Yeah, sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Look, I'm going to leave. You guys can conduct the rest of it.
We'll have a few more beers.
But whenever we chatted, you were talking about Colombiano and the plans and the writing process being different and stuff. So... obviously, it's very different writing a story of like you and Thomas's basically life story for the period that you lived and telling Thomas's life story as well, a true story, compared to what you've done with Colombiano, which is... So would you call it a fictional, loosely based on true events, fictional stories?
I heard the term recently, faction, just like a blend of fact and fiction. That's kind of like a bit of a pretentious term.
Yeah.
Essentially,
non-factual.
The way I would describe it would be it's a fictional storyline, it's a fictional story arc, but set against a factual background. So the historical period that I was writing about is completely accurate. The events that occurred within this book had all occurred. They just didn't all occur to one person. So I interviewed probably 40 or 50 child soldiers in Colombia and then took the best or the most dramatic parts of each of those stories and made it as if all those things that had occurred to one person. So, it's a work of imagination. I also relied pretty heavily upon my story consultant, Simone Camilleri, who is a dear friend of mine since university, and she was helping me kind of develop the female side of things as well. So my initial aim was to write about child soldiers and the horrors that they go through. Yep. And most of the interview subjects were boys. And then Simone was like, well, what about the female perspective? So I also interviewed 1/3 of child soldiers in Colombia were girls.
Really?
Yeah.
And are they sold into this is a rough question right off the bat, but are they sold, like when you see a child soldier in the mind's eye, you think of a child with a gun, right?
Yeah.
Are they soldiers? Are they taken into the army as sex slaves, or like how's
not sex slaves. So basically when people think of child soldiers, they usually think of Africa and Blood Diamond and all the recent reports about the warlords in Africa. Most of the child soldiers join up, inverted commas, voluntarily.
Really?
Yeah, because they've come from really impoverished rural backgrounds. Yeah. In many of the cases of the girls, they've either been physically or sexually abused. So they see men coming past with uniforms and say, "We will not abuse you. Come and join our ranks. We give you 3 meals a day." They join up. And that it's true, they don't actually have to have sex with anyone, but at the same time, there's a certain power hierarchy because there's let's say 1/3 are girls. That means there's a ratio of 2 to 1 men to women. They're living in the jungle. And so basically,
Busy girls.
Yeah, the girls are in high demand, and the prettiest girls go to the commanders sort of by default. And it's pretty horrific, and you see sort of 45, 50-year-old commanders with girls who are 11 or 12 years old. So
it's fucked, isn't
by
it?
our moral standards, it's pretty horrific, but by their standards, in some ways they're just surviving.
But I guess even like, I mean, at that age, you don't know what's right and wrong. You don't know what's consensual, what's not. But from the sound of things, like having sex with some 40 or 50-year-old dude that provides them with, you know, good health, good food for compared to what they know is not a bad thing, you know?
Yeah, well, in some ways, it's like, that was the question I was asking. It's like, why would kids who were, you know, most of them were 12 or 13 years old when they joined up, because basically they grew up in a zone which is like a rural zone, which is controlled by either the FARC or the paramilitaries. And the economy is pretty weak. There's high unemployment. The education rates are pretty low. So you're a kid. You've got 7 brothers, Catholic families, and along comes an armed militia and says, "Come and join up." And so for them, if they're coming from these horrific backgrounds, like where they're being sexually abused by male family members, it's like, you know, why do they join up? And it amazed me that for these girls and boys, it was a step up in the world.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So when you're talking about, because we always hear about I have heard about the FARC.
Yeah.
And so is that a legitimate operation, or is that's a guerrilla paramilitary, or how would you explain the FARC?
Yeah,
and where do these guys fit into the child soldiers? Who are they? Because you mentioned them as a separate entity.
Yeah.
Where do they all link up?
Okay, so you probably go a step back to Colombia's history. So Colombia is an amazing country. It's up in the northwestern tip of South America, bordered by 5 other countries: Panama, Ecuador, Brazil, Venezuela, Peru, and Bolivia. And it's very wealthy in terms of natural resources, and at the same time, there's a complete maldistribution of wealth. Mm-hmm. So in the mid-1960s, there was a campesino or subsistence farmer uprising, and they basically decided to install communism and try and overthrow what they perceived to be the corrupt central government.
Right.
So they started their war in the 1960s, and then along came the paramilitaries, their extreme right-wing opposition. At about the mid-70s, both sides grew as a result of drug trafficking and kidnapping and extortion. Mm-hmm. So, the FARC that was the principal terrorist organization there.
Right, and that's the right-wing terrorist organisation that was trying to overthrow the government. Is that FARC?
No, sorry. So the FARC was a left-wing communist organisation trying to overthrow them. And actually, this last year they signed the ceasefire agreement with the government, and this year, only a few months ago, they finally surrendered and handed their weapons in.
Right.
And they're now going for Congress, and this is a hugely controversial issue for most Colombians.
Right, so that was a 30-year... 53-year war from FARC, the paramilitary. That's insane.
Yeah.
So these to get back to the children that are, obviously written Colombiano about. So when they're child soldiers, who are they getting recruited by?
Okay, so the argument, and it's a sort of facetious argument to my mind, the argument by both these big groups, and there are a number of terrorist organisations there, but the 2 main ones are the FARC, guerrilla, the communists, and the right-wing death squads, the paramilitaries. And their argument is, guess what? Injustice, social poverty, and the war and the civil war affects everyone equally. It doesn't matter whether you're a male or female, whether you're an adult or a child.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's your social obligation to take a side. Mm-hmm. So that's their argument for recruiting child soldiers.
Really?
Pretty weak one. Guess what? Kids are affected by social injustice, therefore kids should have to actually fight in a war.
Yeah, because that's what's more just.
That's what I do.
So they're getting recruited into both sides at this point, basically, for whoever they choose to be the most righteous.
It's usually depend upon which side dominates the region in which they live. So, and the worst situation for these kids is if they live in a grey zone, like an area which is previously been controlled by one side but now been taken over by the next. Mm-hmm. So that's when they come in and they go, all right, who was collaborating with the enemy previously? if you don't join us, then we believe that you are sympathising with them and will kill you and your family. So, horrific human rights abuses, torture, murder, just horrific things these kids go through.
And how prominent is this sort of stuff when you go to these places? Like, is it pretty much in your face, or is it like behind closed doors? And
no, you would almost never witnessed it.
Yeah,
particularly as a Westerner. But it's going on all the time. I mean, let me give you an example. Colombia, as of today's date, has officially 6.9 million internally displaced people. That's from a population base of around 45 million Colombians.
Right.
So in other words, more than 1 in 10 Colombian citizens is internally displaced, has been pushed away from their home. Is it in your face? Do you see them being held at gunpoint? No. But you see them in the slums, you see them just in the streets going, what are you doing here?
Yeah, and it's all based on that. Fucking hell.
So, what are some of the things, like when you were writing the book and you were sitting down with these children, like how did their day-to-day life go? Were these child soldiers out in like military groups shooting and killing people, or were they brought in to do little menial tasks to lend a hand, or was it pretty horrific, the stuff that they were going through? Because I haven't read the book. We were going to try and do
I think we should cut the podcast right here.
Yeah, it's done now. Yeah.
You were supposed to send me it last week.
Show some respect.
You're supposed to send me the ebook. But these kids, like...
Show some respect. These dog.
These kids, like, what are they actually going through day to day? What are some of the stories that you heard?
Well, I mean, they're recruited for a range of reasons. So typically, once they're old enough to fire an AK-47 or a Galil, age of 13, 14, let's say, and also carry a 40-pound, 18-kilogram backpack, that's when they potentially could become frontline soldiers.
They're in.
Sometimes that's the age when they're primed for being recruited.
Yep.
Prior to that, they will accept children as spies or as messengers, and they'll use them in towns to sit on street corners and to report back via radio on who's going past what point. So, I mean, basically these kids, because they're kind of more innocent looking, they'll be able to get through military checkpoints, police checkpoints, and they'll be able to carry messages.
They're very much an asset.
And if they're just sitting on a street corner, who's going to blame a kid? But then at the end of the day, everyone knows, why isn't that kid at school? And why is that kid holding a radio? Now, just the fact of holding a radio doesn't mean that you're an armed combatant. But because the fact of them helping an armed group means that they're an enemy of the other, and they could easily be killed in their family.
Oh,
it's crazy. It's like when I went through the favelas in Rio, and see the same thing.
Just kids on street corners.
All the kids on the street corners have got walkie-talkies, and they're all working for. And it's the same thing for them. They work for the drug barons of the favelas and the slums because they provide the accommodation, they provide the hospitals, they provide the schooling, they provide everything for the favela. And so it's like Rusty was saying, it's like a
cool job, gives them a place in society.
Yeah.
Well, they run their community, you know.
And if you want to see a movie which demonstrates that really well, there's a really good director called Jose Padilla, in fact, who's the EP of Narcos. Oh, yeah. Everyone loves Narcos.
Yeah.
Really?
But if you want to see his earlier work, there's a movie called Elite Squad, which was Elite Squad 2. The first one's better. But Elite Squad shows the role of kids in all these favelas, and there's a really good song called Rapa de Armas.
Which is obviously meaning Bill. Because Bill speaks Spanish, so obviously...
Yeah, Rapa de Arapas. I have no idea what that means.
Well, it's kitchen sink renovation. That's what it's the Spanish form. Yeah. Hey,
cool.
with the child soldiers, Russ, is that like, so they're initially brought in, well, they're recruited initially because it's, there's obviously a lot of benefits as opposed to being homeless and on the street and in poverty. And then are they brought up under these sort of communities, I guess, like with a sense of like ideology, brainwashing, and all this sort of stuff? Like they start to really believe what they've been told.
Absolutely, because I mean, like, you think about when you're 12, right? Think about when you're 12, you're 13, and you've got, let's say you were taken away from your moral guardians being your parents. So your parents are the ones going, this is wrong. Look left and right when you cross the road.
Totally.
Don't always say please. Always say hello to a stranger. Like all those little values that make you who you are today. That are highly influential on who you are as a person. Take your parents out of that system and then put another adult with a gun in that position.
Yeah.
And then that person's going, you are fighting for social justice. This is what you're doing. Society's unjust. And they start to brainwash them and go, and of course there's kids, if you've got no other information coming in and you're not allowed to object to the information that you're given, then you start to take it on wholesale. In fact, there are big rewards for repeating that mantra. So, who remembers yesterday's lesson about social injustice? Yes, there's an oligarchy that's oppressing us and we need to kidnap them. Anyone disagree?
Yeah.
No. And then, yes, well done.
Yeah.
Well done, Bill and Tom.
Isn't that scary though? Like if you're given something, so I mean, basically what you've just described is literally just religious fundamentalism.
Right, and this is not religious. So the communist guerrilla, at least, communism actually is a doctrine which which rejects any kind of religious indoctrination. Right, so it's basically it's a rationalist thought based on Karl Marx and Leninism. And so they don't believe in God. So they reject God. That's one of the first things they have to reject because Colombian society is fundamentally Catholic. So forget the fact that you were brought up believing in God. You're now a believer of communism and social justice.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So do they practice any form of spirituality?
None.
Really?
None whatsoever.
So they're atheists?
Complete atheists.
Wow.
Communism.
Yeah. No shit.
That's really strange for a Latin American culture too, really, isn't it?
Well, they have to really sort of
atheist?
work to reverse their form of thought.
Yep.
But at the same time, they it's the same as Cuba, for example. Cuba is also actually a communist or socialist country, and yet they have to sort of allow for. They had there's a little bit of Catholicism there. There's a little bit of what do they call it, like the Santeria, just kind of like devil worship, and they allow that.
Devil worship.
Yeah, there's a little bit of like kind of
It's good shit, mate. It's good shit.
There's a little bit of white magic going on there. in Cuba and some of those countries. Yeah,
It's just like
but they have to. The dominant regime has to go. Right, we want to recruit people from all these different ideologies, so we're going to have to leave them with something. You can't just
let's get the badasses with the devil.
Totally.
We'll get them with the devil hook.
Yeah,
And so
totally.
you get this really crazy mixes of values.
Yeah. See, that's really interesting. So, like, because, I mean, religious fundamentalism, like evangelicals and stuff, that stuff really fascinates me because it's like, I mean, if you're brought up with something like under that amount of credence, like if I'm brought up with, I mean, Ricky Gervais talks about this sort of stuff and he says, like you're brought up with don't touch the fire, shake hands with someone to be polite, there is a God. If that's all brought into the same level of credence, you're never going to deny any of that shit. It's just always like, yeah, there's a God. What do you mean there's not a God?
Yeah.
So, like, I was watching this documentary about ISIS, and they were showing all the brainwashing of the children, all this sort of stuff.
Those little schools are called madras, and basically they're basically saying if you can get someone young enough, you can completely control their mind.
Absolutely.
And that was an indication. And it's not just ISIS. This is centuries ago. Christianity was doing the same thing, just taking people at a young age and indoctrinating them in a certain school of thought.
Totally.
Luckily, we now live under like a pluralist, liberal society, which allows a multiplicity of thought. Pluralism essentially is allowing simultaneous, diverse, and discrepant forms of thought at the same time. And at the same time, what we're seeing now is like a kind of fracturing where the extremes of all those different pluralistic thoughts are saying, right, let's go toe to toe. So to my mind, what I think ISIS is trying to do is going, right, let's just force people to choose a side, which is I guess the same as what's happening. What I was arguing was happening in Colombia.
Totally.
When you get forced to choose a side, that side does not necessarily represent your personal views, but you actually have to go one or the other.
It's the lesser of two evils.
Lesser of two evils.
Basically.
Exactly right.
That's
a true dilemma.
Yeah, I suppose that's what's going
one.
on in Europe right now, especially like with everything that's been going on in France and Paris and obviously
France and Paris.
Yeah.
Very much. Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
I own a travel company, by the way. Really good at my geography.
Adventure Fit France.
Where are you going, Rusty? By the way,
I don't think beer.
You can take your headphones off, mate.
Bill and I will just chat for a sec.
Sorry, guys. Rusty was just creeping past me in time with a weird look at his face.
And we'll give you a live update. Rusty currently has his pants off and is reaching for a beer. That's gold.
Yeah.
I'm
all right, mate.
I'll go again. I'll be over the limit. That's all right. This is off the record.
You guys going to edit this down?
Nah, we'll keep it in. Fucking hell. We're definitely keeping this shit in.
Yeah.
So, Bill, Are you? How old are you, mate?
Yeah, so, Rusty, when you were doing the... I'll get your headphones back over there for you, mate. When you were doing the... when you were doing all this research over there...
That's awesome.
For however many... How many
you pricks, I'll just walk off.
How many years were you... how many years were you in Colombia doing this research? 6, 7 years?
So I lived in Colombia for 7 years straight.
Yep.
And I was working for the US government for 4 years.
Right. And what were you doing? Mate. What were you doing working for the US government?
I was a program manager. I was a subcontractor to a contracting company that had a contract with the US Department of State or the State Department, and it was basically part of the state counterterrorism umbrella. And the aim was to reduce kidnapping in Colombia at the time. Colombia had the highest rate of kidnapping in the world. Mm-hmm. Between 3,000 and 4,000 people per year. In other words, between, on average, 9-10 people per day.
So did you get that job to help with this research, or did that just come about?
He was the heavy.
You were the heavy man.
He was going there to just ruffle some feathers with the kidnappers, obviously.
Yeah, I'm Rusty Young. You can call me master.
I've got a funny story.
Yeah, all right.
So everyone calls me Rusty, but that's the name of my passport and my name of my driver's license. I was actually born Russell.
Russell Young.
But I didn't like Russell.
Yeah, no one likes it, mate.
No one likes saying Russell. And so when I was like 5 or 6 years old at school, I had this cat, and I loved this cat. Cat was called Pussy.
Crack cat. Oh, sorry.
The cat was just called Pussy.
Yeah.
And so
that makes sense.
I didn't want to be called Russell Young. I wanted to be called Pussy Young. So I started signing my name Pussy Young. Oh. And the teacher actually called my parents in to the school and said, "Your son is refusing to answer to Russell. He's calling himself Pussy." And, and I just think that would be a really cool name. Hi there.
Pussy Young.
Hi there. I work for the US government in counterterrorism. I'm young. Pussy Young.
Yeah. Well, what is your porn name? Do you have a porn name?
This is the porn name where you have to combine your first straight name.
Mine's Nugget Spray.
Yeah, that's sick. Nugget Spray is hectic.
So how do you do it again? It's a street name.
First dog.
No. Sorry, first animal.
First animal.
Some people don't have dogs.
Yeah.
You know, we're a very liberal society. so first animal name and then first street name. Yes.
Redan Blinky.
Oh, that's hectic.
That's not bad.
Do you know what? Now, I'm not sure if people that know this man will be listening to the show, but I do know of someone who may or may not be in the fitness industry, and he did become a porn star, and his name is Liam Hemsworth. How good is that?
That's pretty good.
Do you know Liam Hemsworth?
Mm.
Yeah, he's called his name Liam Hemsworth. How good is it?
You'd want to have the goods to back that up.
You'd want to make sure.
You'd want to make sure you could back that
I'm
name
Liam Hemsworth.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
For boom.
It sucks.
So how did you get Rusty on your passport then?
That was just became my name.
Rusty Young.
Classic.
That's sick. I want to name.
Are you Rusty by deed poll then? Did you change it? Or did the government just go, yeah, chuck it on there.
Yeah.
We'll call you Rusty if you
I don't
want.
give a fuck, mate.
I am not at liberty to answer that question.
We'll get it out of him.
Okay.
Have another beer, mate. Let's go.
Yeah, right. So what were you doing? Like, what was your day-to-day when you were working? So at this time, are you doing the research for Colombiano, or are you just working for the government at this point?
No, I started off in Colombia. Firstly, I arrived there in January 2001 with Thomas McFadden. And
Legend.
we spent about a year there together, writing the book Marching Powder.
Yeah.
We spent 4 months in prison. I was there voluntarily. Wrote the book, published it. Thomas went back to the UK. He said that there were more drugs in London than there were in Colombia. And then he
State of the world.
Then he moved back to Tanzania and he named his first son Rusty.
That's hectic. How good is that?
I hope you guys get
Obviously after yourself. The other famous Rusty.
So I hope you guys get to interview Thomas one day.
Yeah,
he's lovely.
Yeah, definitely.
100%.
Does he come to Australia?
No, he's never been to Australia.
We'll get him over.
I've been to see him in Tanzania. And then I just decided my next book was going to be about Colombia. I didn't know exactly what I was going to write about, but I just knew there were so many stories there. It's just an amazing country. Amazing country. Obviously, Colombia has a reputation for drug trafficking, kidnapping, and
Pretty women.
Beautiful women. But so as I was traveling through an airport, I met a guy on a plane, and he ended up offering me a job with the US government, and so that kind of put my book writing plans on hold for a little bit. But at the same time, the stories I was getting from living this life of, working in counter-terrorism, meeting real live people who were actually in the front line of this war, just going against terrorists, like rescuing child soldiers, rescuing hostages, the stories and the things that I was living through was just like, I was like, wow, this is better than a book.
Yeah.
Why would I spend 8 hours a day writing
Yeah, you can figure that part out later. Get the experiences,
exactly.
figure the book
So I had the
out later.
experiences first, and then I ended up stopping that job and then just going full time on the book.
So you literally got the job from sitting on a plane next to a dude who worked for the US government. That's hectic.
That's fucking pretty random.
Yeah, it's so
working
random.
for Canada. Hey mate, you what are you doing Wednesday? We got some counter-terrorist work.
Exactly. Yeah. Are you in that area? Well, that's good enough. Come here.
It's just going to be in Colombia. We're just dealing with the FARC and the paramilitary. Is that cool with you? I'll be in.
You ever shot
I
a
just
gun?
come out of a Bolivian jail for 4 months and I'm ready to go. Here's my CV.
I actually had to invent a CV and I had to try to think, how do I
Reference Thomas McFadden.
How do I explain the 4 months where I lived in a prison?
Shit.
I don't like to lie, but if you're doing your CV, a lot of people dodge it up and go, July 2012 to 2015. Yeah, I don't like to lie. But there was a 4 month period there, where I was. And
4 month period unknown.
So there's
What does this mean, mate?
there's a guy called the RSO, the Regional Security Officer, for every US embassy. And before you can work for the US government, and as an Australian, you can't work directly as a US government employee. You have to be a contractor, right?
Yes.
If you're not a US citizen.
Yep.
And one of the questions they asked on the application form, they'd already sort of offered me the job, but you still have to fill out the application form. And one of the questions was like, have you ever been to prison?
You mean
Depends how you mean,
I was like, yes, but I'm innocent.
exactly. Yeah.
That's what they all say, mate. No, I really was.
Genuine.
Yeah, I just walked in there.
Genuine. Yeah. Oh, that's gold. So can you tell us about any I'm not sure at how much sort of liberty you're able to talk about your time with the US government. Did you have some really sort of hectic moments, or what was an experience that sort of sticks out?
Look, not really. I mean, I can talk in general about it.
Make stuff up if you like.
This book is fiction.
Yeah,
this podcast is fictional.
Yeah, it's faction, mate. It's faction.
Non-faction.
Yeah, you just be honest.
None of us exist.
Yeah, exactly.
We're all a figment of our own imaginations. So in terms of hectic moments, look, I basically from the very beginning, it's all about security protocol. So even though Bogota was a relatively safe place, they really don't want people to get into situations which are compromising for the US government. There were 3 guys who were down there when I was there, who actually their plane got shot down or came down through mechanical failure, depending on which version you believe. And they were taken by the communist guerrilla, and they were held for 7.5 years in the jungle.
What?
And the operation to rescue them cost, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, and just hundreds of personnel hours down there in Colombia. So you do not want to be captured by... When you're working for the US government, you do not want to become captured by a communist organisation who are masters in kidnapping.
That is insane.
So from the outset, basically my life was just about security protocol, moving house a little bit. I had like a level 3 armoured vehicle, so basically it's not bulletproof. 9mm rounds will bounce off a lightly armoured vehicle. 5.56 rounds will fracture the windscreen but not penetrate. 7.62s will probably go through. Blast proof from underneath. It had grenade proof doors.
So you were driving a tank.
Yeah.
Actually, the vehicles were considered to be war material.
Really?
So it was actually considered to be a tank. So you had like an extra liability, an extra responsibility. Where if you hit a pedestrian, you're just like hitting a pedestrian with a tank.
Yeah. What was the bond on that? Jesus.
So was that like when you were doing that, was that like day to day just the most riveting like kind of job to be in? Were you always kind of living like you're on edge?
The best job I've ever had in my life, not just in terms of being on edge. Like obviously I like a little bit of risk and danger. Yeah. The guy that I met on the plane became a mentor to me, and he also sort of flipped my perspective on life. Because I always thought of the US government, and being a sort of liberal Australian, I always thought You know what? The US government's out there just ruling the world and just taking over the oil fields, and they're not really trying to free people. They are there to make money out of all these countries. And in this case, they weren't. Like they were pumping money into a country to rescue hostages. Like, there's no justification whatsoever for taking someone and holding a gun to their head and going, how much are you going to pay mum and dad for your son back? That's it. Like, who cares whether you're left-wing communist or right-wing fascist? Doesn't matter. How much are you guys worth to your parents? How much would you pay of your wealth if your parents or your best friend? What if one of you guys got kidnapped? How much would the other one pay? Fucking everything.
Oh, absolutely.
I'd throw in at least half a lazy hour.
I'm worth $10.
I'd let the kidnapper finish me beer.
Fuck you.
No, it's a valid point.
It's invaluable. It's priceless. It's totally priceless.
There's no
unconditional love.
There's no value on human life. And so what this program was doing was going out and just trying to rescue all these people in the jungles who are being held hostage, and they've been held hostage for 7, 10, up to 12 years. I think the longest record kidnapping was 12 years. Imagine being held for 12 years. Like, just think of the last 12 years of your life.
Seventh of your life.
Take them away.
Totally.
And you spent that time in the jungle, not knowing whether you're going to live or die, and suffering every day, eating really bad food. But also, it's worse than prison. Prison, at least you know when you're going to get out. There's a certain monotony, certain security, a certain routine there. But you might get killed in the crossfire. You might get executed if the government comes to rescue.
Totally.
Is it? Have you seen Game of Thrones?
Yeah, a few times. We're up to seven.
Yeah. So you know Theon, how he's originally living with the Starks as a ward. Is it a ward or is it? He's held.
Greyjoy.
Greyjoy. Yeah, he's held by the Starks as a hostage.
Yeah.
But he lives as part of the family. Like, are these people surely after like 12 years, 5, 7, 12 years, they'd be kind of getting looked after pretty well, or are these hostages in the jungle? They're in horrible conditions the whole time.
Horrible conditions. I mean, there is something which, like I recognised. Hostage syndrome called the Stockholm syndrome, where people who are the hostage victims start to relate and even fall in love with their captors as a means of survival. It's pretty horrific, and I can't believe that you tried to relate my book to Game of Thrones.
But you just
I relate everything to Game of Thrones.
But you just become a complete and utter nihilist. You'd be like, all right,
for
fuck
anyone
this.
listening to that sound, that's Rusty vaping.
Yeah,
I can hear it straight through my
motherfucker.
Through my
it's just vaping the fuck
Unless
out.
you're my medical insurer, in which case he's lying.
True that. Oh, that's so good.
Sorry, Tom, I cut off your question there, but
No, I was just saying, like, you just become a complete and utter nihilist. Like, every day to be like, fuck it. Like, I just think of someone like in a war-torn country, or just like a soldier. You know, every day you're fighting, gunshot at you every time. You're like, fuck, I get like 24 hours. Put it this way, it's. I can see how justified it is for soldiers to just be doing heroin and going to like brothels every day, because it's just like, fuck, I reckon I'm going to die every day. Like, what am I going to do? You know?
Yeah, so these guys didn't even have that option of doing drugs or going to brothels. Not saying that's what soldiers should do either.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
but I think what you're referring to is like particularly the Vietnam War, where people would go out and tour for a few weeks at a time, exposed to extreme danger, think they're going to die any moment, come back and go, well, next time I go out there, in fact, I probably will likely be killed.
Absolutely.
And therefore, what do I care about human values? I should just kill someone. I should just have sex with hookers.
Get as much pleasure in as I can before I die.
Get as much pleasure in before I can die.
Totally.
And these guys never had the option of time off, so it was just a constant stress on their psyche.
Yeah, hey Russ, I wanted to ask something. I wanted to ask something like a bit of a tangent, but I just read a book, 10% Happier by Dan Harris, and it just talks about like mindfulness meditation and all this sort of thing. But he was a foreign correspondent for he was a news reporter, and he was in a war-torn country. He went to Afghanistan and all this sort of stuff, and he sort of went through anxiety and panic attacks and depression when he came back because I believe to some degree he suffered from PTSD, or he was referring to that. after coming out from a place like that. What's your experience in coming back to such a privileged society like Melbourne after being in a place like that?
Yeah, good question. I mean, look, I've been asked this by a lot of audience members during the talks, and it's like, do you think you suffer from PTSD? Not at all. Like, fuck, mate. People who are on the front line of battle, and I've never been the front line of battle. I'm not claiming in any way to be a hero. People who do that, just it's just. Of course, they witness people's body parts being blown off. People who are hit by landmines. I've never been on the front line of battle. I've been around people who have. So my aim as a writer was to get as close as possible to the war without actually being getting shot at. Potentially, I was at risk, yes, but I don't have PTSD. But in answer to your question, coming back from that extreme experience where I guess there was a high level of risk, and being around and listening to these stories of people who actually definitely went through the most horrific things you could suffer as a human being. There's a sense of hollowness, a sense of boredom, and a sense of
that's right. That's right.
And how do people go out on a Friday or a Saturday night and go, oh, look at me, I've got my clothes on and I'm in this cafe or I'm in this bar, I'm in this restaurant.
Naked right now.
Look at me. We're not naked, for the record.
There was a dead pause there. Russ looked right in my eyes and was like, who's got their cock out?
There's some weird stuff going on here, but
that's the point I reckon Dan Harris makes as well. Is like PTSD for what he saw. But he came home and started a really bad coke habit or whatever because he needed that endorphin rush that he wasn't getting from being in the war zone,
Yeah.
And you've probably had. I'm not saying you've got a fucking drug habit. I've got
a vaping habit right now.
Yeah, you got a vaping
24
habit.
beers in.
But I mean, but you've gone through like living in a Colombian fucking prison for 6 months.
Yeah.
7 years living in Colombia, writing this book, working with so like how does it come out of these? To build on Tommy's question, how's it for you coming back into reality?
Yeah, I mean, what's reality, firstly? As in,
Melbourne reality.
Is Australia or is Melbourne or is Sydney, is that reality or is Colombia reality or is Africa reality, right? So that's the first thing.
Yes.
So Melbourne is definitely not the reality.
I do not have PTSD. I guess when I was living in a prison and then working with the US government and kind of constantly living under a certain level of anxiety and stress, your adrenaline's going constantly.
Totally.
And that becomes it could become a form of addiction, right? So then when you come back to normal life, inverted commas, for Australians, it can be, at first it's a little bit boring and then you go, but then there's a richness, and that is just hanging out with new people. I mean, you guys are getting naked here in my hotel room, showing off your tattoos.
Yeah, that's right. That's getting next level. Yeah,
it's really interesting, and because I went through a book just recently called Try by Sebastian Junga, who was a war correspondent as well, one of the best books ever, and it talks about the stuff that how. You're talking about the times where you're in danger and you're under the pump and you're working together for a common cause. The times that people in war times, in like World Wars, Vietnam Wars, any time that people were under the pump as a society, they are the times, like after 9/11, they're the times that people report the biggest, greatest level of happiness.
Stories,
greatest level of happiness because of the community feel.
Apropos of that, figure this. One of the things that I loved about Colombia is the people. That was the thing I loved the most. Colombia consistently, and again, these reports are subjective. Who knows how they ask the questions? But in world happiness surveys, Colombians rate consistently number 1 or number 2 as the happiest people in the world.
No shit.
Really?
And yet, Colombia was described by the UN as a human rights disaster. They had the highest murder rate in the world, the highest kidnap rate in the world, the highest. They now have the highest number of internally displaced people in the world, the highest murder rate of journalists, the highest murder rate of union leaders. This is the tortures are horrific. So, how is it? How is it in a country with this absolutely violent and tragic and horrific history, how is it that they are such happy people? And it's not just filling out a survey. Go there or just meet a Colombian in Australia. Yeah. They are really cool people. Colombians 100%. Are just optimistic, happy people. And so how do you reconcile with the fact that in their country they've got so much suffering, and yet they're happy people. And
Well, but it's all they know.
and maybe on the flip side, Australia, which has one of the highest suicide rates in the world, and yet we're so privileged. Are we just inventing all these problems for ourselves? Oh my God, my boyfriend dropped me. Oh my God, my selfie looked really bad. Oh my God.
Privilege is the worst thing that we can have.
Maybe humans are designed to deal with conflict, to deal with pressure, and if you don't have enough of that, you invent it for yourself.
Oh,
For sure.
It's
For
like,
sure.
that is just a fact.
But-
Like, humans are made to survive. We've evolved to survive.
100%.
Totally.
But I think the big thing with the war thing in particular is the community. Because if you're under the pump in Colombia, you're getting paramilitaries and FARC, and people are getting kidnapped. You're always valuing your time around your loved ones.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
always
yeah.
valuing your time around your community. And say it's like, when Pablo Escobar was going through wrecking house in the 80s and early 90s and so forth. People that get displaced, then you have to use your community. You have to bond together. You have to share things, and that's how we are. That's how we evolved.
And you know what happens as well. So when you're really concentrating on the basic facts of fundamental survival, like as in, what am I going to eat next, and who can I really trust? Because guess what? I got 20,000 friends on Facebook or Instagram. I've got 13 million likes on Instagram.
Yeah.
Who cares? Are any of those people actually connected to you?
Yeah, that's right.
The people who you actually can depend on, you can count on one hand. And when you're in a war situation or in a country which is war torn, you really get to the nub of humanity, and that's what I loved. It was like, this was reality for me. And your question was, how do I deal with the reality of Australia? For me, Colombia was far more reality than Sydney or Melbourne. I love being back here. I love hanging out with you guys. We're in a privileged position. We're sitting in a hotel room, drinking some beers, talking in a podcast, but there are people on the other side of the world who are starving from hunger, who are internally displaced, who have been kidnapped, and that goes on around us. And, it's not good enough to just go, Instagram post or Facebook post, here's a social issue, I'm behind this, rah, rah, rah.
Yeah.
That is not good enough for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, like, do you miss it? Are you going to go? Do you have any plans to go back, or?
No, I mean, I think the reaction could be. I don't know the Colombian government's reaction or the FARC's reaction or the paramilitary's reaction to this book. I lied to a lot of people.
What do you mean?
Well, when I was working for the US government, I didn't tell anyone that's what I was doing. I was living with a girl for 3.5 years. I didn't tell her what I was doing.
So you couldn't? Is that because you just weren't at liberty to talk about it? Or?
No, it wasn't part of the contractual conditions. It was just more about if you tell someone something which is like a kind of big piece of potential news, people are natural gossipers.
Yeah. True.
Imagine if it got out in a country with the highest rate of kidnapping in the world.
US government.
That you're working in anti-kidnapping.
Yeah, that's
you'd
true.
be potentially a target, right?
Yes.
And even your girlfriend, like you tell your best friend, your girlfriend, and your mother, and then eventually it gets out. Who told?
Yeah, exactly.
So just
Who do
tell
you
no
trust?
one.
Yeah.
I trusted everyone, but just made sense not to tell anyone.
And so were most people within the people you were working with, were they doing the same thing? Like, was it just... I just feel like there'd be a level of protection with that sort of stuff. Even though it's not in the contractual agreement, you just be like, people would just start asking questions.
Most of them were just really, really discreet people, and they had very insular lives. They would have either a bulletproof shuttle bus picking them up, or they'd drive their bulletproof car, or they had a chauffeur. And they just they had minimal contact with other people, so you kind of like, you knew there was someone from the US Embassy working there, but you didn't know what they were doing. I'm really social. So I was still going out to bars and hanging out with my friends.
Yeah,
but I
doing podcasts.
Doing a podcast. But I just didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my ex-girlfriend. When I finally told her, when she finally found out, she was like, she felt like majorly betrayed.
Really?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It was like, basically I was coming home saying, I was working in construction.
Yeah.
You're lying.
Kill it, dudes.
Yeah, lies will put a barbie in the relationship.
Just brick. Just plaster.
And even just last week, a friend of mine who worked in the charity industry, like the NGO world, just goes, I saw this news report about you. Is this true? And he was a really good friend of mine for 7 years in Colombia. He's still a good friend. And just said, is this true? Like, why didn't you tell me? I was like, well... I couldn't.
But how? I mean, that's very justifiable. Like, I know I'm harping on about
it's
this,
justifiable
but
from my point of view, but think about how you'd feel as someone who's your friend, or someone who's living with you, someone who's sharing your bed.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe I'm not in that position, so, and I probably can't talk from a very real perspective, but I just don't think like I'd. Like
No,
if you said, by the way, I'm a fucking spy, I'd be like, whatever.
But there's a couple of ways you can do these things, and Rusty made a decision to go about it the way that he's gone about it.
Yeah.
But
I would have done the same thing, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I mean, it might have been something that you could have said, look, I can't tell you what I do.
No, because that's giving it away as well.
Yeah, it totally gives it away.
Well, then you did have no other choice. But they're your
I'm
only
definitely
options,
not
really.
working for the US government, put it that way.
Yeah.
Let me ask you. You guys are too good. You two guys are really good friends, right? So you go, how was your day? Where were you at 2:00 today? And you go, I was at the gym. And you're lying.
Well, I don't look like I go to the gym. So.
You've got the tattoos.
Yeah, I've got the tattoos. I've got enough. I've got 3 sets of 6 in me.
Yeah, no, that's tough, isn't it? Yeah. That's super tough.
Yeah, but like if you, because I'm sure your ex-missus would have wanted an explanation and stuff. You just be like, hey, look, like I couldn't have said because of this, and this, and I'm under a fucking fair bit of stress.
I told her, and look, she accepted it eventually, and she accepted the reasons, and we're still really good friends, but
sure.
It's still a big shock for people around you. It's like that you've been
it's a big shock.
And it's hard because it's like if you're a naturally honest, transparent person, and those are very Australian values. Australians in general don't lie that much. I don't think.
No.
It's like we.
That's me. I'm going, no. I like fucking 25 times a day. Yeah, that's a lot right there.
I know both of you guys are married, but
exactly.
And you're also on Tinder.
Yeah.
And you're
he's on Grindr.
I'm on Bumble too. I just found it.
There was
Rumble.
Grindr.
One of you, I won't say whom. Toast at the beginning of this round of six packs was to wives and girlfriends. May they never meet. Whoever laughed the hardest was the guilty party.
Yeah. For people that know me, shit.
Siobhan doesn't listen to the show, does she?
Nah, she doesn't listen to the show.
Your wife does, though.
Yeah. My kids do, just not my girlfriend. Don't give it away, man. Neither does Derek.
Or Eugene.
I've got a question.
Sorry.
I've got a question, which is a huge tangent.
It's
gone to the point of like the way the Colombian and Latin American lifestyle. I was talking about my Spanish tutor and obviously the fact that they have lower
Guatemala and divorce rates,
lower divorce rates, and trying to figure out with Mariella, we're having this long discussion about whether Guatemala people are happy or whether it's a cultural thing that they just hang on to marriages longer. And she believes 100%, swears black and blue, that they're a happier people. They're just happier than all the Western world.
I don't think they are. Guatemala City is one of the most dangerous cities in the world. Guatemalan people, at least in my limited experience, and perhaps I'm generalising, they're pretty cool, they're pretty relaxed, they're pretty chilled out people, but they're not the happiest people in the world.
No, that was my question anyway.
So
but to wrap up my question to get it out is do you think, having lived in like Latin America and having seen that side of the world, how people, because families live together a lot longer, the communities I feel like are a lot closer, our privileged lives that we live in the Western world, we're so disconnected, with our friends, with our family, with everything. Do you think we're doing it?
Stereotypically speaking, but yeah.
Well, I wouldn't think it would be stereotypically speaking, but do you think we're doing it right? Do you think the Western world is doing it right? That's my broad question.
I think fundamentally they're the most basic of tensions, of dynamics that we all face is the fundamental, binary conflict between individual self-interest, like our own selfishness versus social cooperation, and the ideal balance that we could strike between our own selfishness and social cooperation would be the point by which we could be both selfish and also socially cooperative. In countries where there is poor economic development, they tend to rely a lot more on social cooperation. They have far stronger social connections and social networks, communities, villages. You tend to see kids living with their families for a lot longer period of time, and then you tend to see at the back end of people's lives, kids looking after their parents. That's their obligation. Yeah. In our society, the aim and your whole self-esteem is based upon being completely independent, not only independent of your family, but independent of everyone. In other words, you have to stand out as an individual.
Yeah, personally successful.
And there's a really good documentary about this, about the essentially claiming that the 21st century was the century of individualism, and that people asserted that their own individual existence was superior to everyone else's. And if you think about the logical consequence of that, if every single one of us on 6.5 billion people on planet goes, I'm an individual, I am more important, and my sole role is to prove how different I am to other people. And you set that as an exercise, and you go, look how cool I am, look how good my clothes are, look how smart I am, look how unique I am. You're not actually going to end up winning, because we actually have far more in common than we have in difference. So to my mind, that was an erroneous path to set out upon. And that to my mind is equated with capitalism. Capitalism is about one person competing against the next, and basically there has to be a winner. And cooperative behaviour, to my mind, is far more equitable and far more harmonious path to pursue.
It's a funny one though, because I do agree with what you're saying, but I also do like that sense of individualism, because if we're talking about happiness, right, and we're talking about happy, for me, I've had to be selfish.
Do you?
Well, no, I've had to be selfish to come out of an area of anxiety and OCD, because I had to give myself time to find who I was and find what makes me happy in this world. So I had to give myself that individualistic time. And I feel like happiness is such an intangible thing to measure, because it's just like, what makes you happy, what makes me happy. There's no sort of sense of comparison there. And if we're talking about people in Guatemala, are you happy? It's like, yeah, I'm really happy. It's
so how would you ever measure that?
Yeah, but it's a rate. They work it off. They work it off a rate of perceived happiness. So a scale of 1 to 10.
But that's
how you
all
do
they
all
know. What they know is very different to what we know.
That's
and we have a lot more.
That's really relative.
There's international surveys.
Same
questions asked in different languages, different people, different cultures. So how would you ask the questions to decide whether you or I or Bill were happier than one another, and how would you actually prove that and demonstrate? So obviously the first step is subjective, reporting, as in I go, guess what, Tommy, I'm happier than you, and you go, no, you're not, Rusty, I'm happier. Bill goes, well, neither of you are happy.
Yeah.
So there's the subjective side, there's the objective side, the health, well-being, exercise, diet, all those sorts of factors, income, where you're living, your level of education, but all those factors combined, Colombians consistently report as
So what are the subjective measures then?
Well, to my mind, it's just smiling and laughing, how much you laugh in your life.
Yeah.
How many friends you have. Whether you actually, we just ask them, so, how are you doing? Oh, I'm happy. Or if you go to someone and go, how was your day? And they go, oh, I'm under massive stress. Oh, my ex-girlfriend, my ex-wife was doing this.
Yeah, both of them.
Looking into the negative, and you never find Colombians doing that. Colombians just sort of like, I'm fucking awesome. Yeah, my dad got shot. My cousin got kidnapped.
But is that because, I'm just saying, is that because that's just all they know? Is that because that's such a commonality within their society?
I think when you're constantly confronted with stress and anxiety, you stop concentrating on yourself. You stop thinking about your own selfish, trivial anxieties. Because a lot of the things you go, I need some time to sort through my issues from my relationship with my parents and my childhood and my ex-girlfriend and my job and me. When you're fighting to survive, you stop thinking about yourself.
Yeah. That's right.
Look, I do agree. My anxiety, we always talk about mental health on this show, and my anxieties were very, very irrational based, and were very, very, very much based on internal circumstances.
Right.
And ideally.
So where'd they come from?
Let's
do a podcast one day where I get to interview you guys, mate.
Yeah, I'd be keen.
Yeah?
So who are you? Tom, that's it.
I will take you apart and you'll end up tearing up.
Rusty Young, the psychologist. No, but mine, I believe after many hours of meditation on it, there were a couple of things. Mine were, there was a lot of volatility in my life at the time. This is actually what this tattoo here represents.
Describe volatility.
So, parents were going through a divorce. My sister was in hospital. Dad had depression. A couple of things were going on in my life. My cousin was very ill at the time, and this was all. I didn't actually have any stress or anxiety related to this sort of stuff, but I believe that that didn't help, Yeah. But fundamentally the anxiety that I got was, a sense of losing my sexuality, losing mental health. I thought I'd develop schizophrenia. I thought I'd go to hell and burn for eternity, and they're all very irrational fears. And I developed a lot of OCD.
Came from a lot of, obviously, like you had some religious background there.
Yes, correct, and that's why I'm not a big.
And also, you're smart and you're curious, and so you start looking into mental health issues. And this is one of the dangerous things: is that people read up on psychological conditions and start going, I'm now an expert.
That's right.
And you should go, you've come out of a war, therefore you must have PTSD. Or, and this is the case of every single ex-girlfriend you ever have, they go, yeah, he's actually a sociopath or a psychopath. Yeah, he's got all the qualities. And none of us are actually qualified psychologists to be able to actually make those statements.
Yeah, you're just ticking off a box in the end. Yeah. No, but look, I mean, for me, and again, this is my personal experience with Bill's had his own personal experiences with anxiety and stuff as well. And like, they're all, I mean, like they're just, for me, what I had to learn was, so I had to gain a very good sense of self. So I had to learn about who I really was from a very deep subconscious level. I had to learn about, based on that, the things in my life that coincided with who I was, and then the things that didn't. So, was playing footy, was hanging out with these people, this, were these the right things to do with my life? And now I've since developed a life that coincides with who I truly am.
So let me ask you a question. Let's flip this around. You guys have been interviewing me. What makes you happy?
Well, externally or internally?
Are you happy?
I honestly believe that I'm extremely happy. Right. Very, very happy. The thing I'm doing with the Mind Mate, which is a business that I've just started doing, this podcast, I mean, I think maybe for 45 minutes or something, and I don't think I've ever worked a day in my life whilst doing Adventure Fit Radio with my best day-to-day mate and getting to meet and becoming and befriending people like yourself.
So when you say, by the way, I'm going to start picking you here.
Yeah.
When you say this is my best day-to-day mate, I presume there's other mates that you
That's
have.
how we explain each other.
Yeah.
We haven't been best mates. I've got a best mate since 5 that I was best man at his wedding. Like, he's my best mate,
It's
you know?
kind
But
of
I see
hard,
him once every
hard when you've got a really good best mate you're really close to and you work with, and then you've got another best mate who's actually your best mate.
Oh, I've got
about 1,000 best mates.
I've got 6 best mates.
Okay, right. So all right. So now let's break it down. So here's my theory of happiness: that essentially that it's a conscious exercise of human will, and you have to actually decide between two possible outcomes, the minimum of two possible outcomes, and finally accept your own responsibility between those two possible outcomes.
Yes.
So if you say this is my best possible day-to-day mate, I'm going to say who's your actual best mate and how do you define it. And so between your 1,000 mates, your 10 mates, or your best day-to-day mates, who's your best friend?
My girlfriend is my best mate.
Might offend him.
Yeah, my girlfriend is my best friend.
You what? What did you say?
I said
it might offend me.
Might offend you, but,
wouldn't offend me.
But you actually have to make that decision. You have to prioritise. You have to actually make a decision who's your most important person.
Yeah, my girlfriend is my best friend.
Oh, that's great.
To say that.
And James Frey is my best friend.
Yeah, exactly.
He's been my best friend since I was 5 years old.
But based on my current scenario, I'd put him at second for sure. Bill is my second best friend for sure.
Silver place.
You told me on Grindr.
Mate, we're on the record here. You're my best friend. You're my best friend, Russ. You're the big pub 69.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got sidetracked there. Can we go back? Anyway, enough about you guys.
Yeah.
Let's talk about me.
Okay, well, let's move things on. So Russ, you have produced a documentary. Directed, produced.
I was the narrator presenter.
You were the narrator presenter.
The amazing director. His name is Colin Offland.
Okay.
He's from
Colonoscopy.
Colin Offland.
Yes.
He has a company called Chief Productions, and he's an amazing guy. The reason I accepted this documentary is because he went over and he did an amazing documentary called Big Bang in Pyongyang.
Copenhagen. Yep.
Which is the capital of North Korea. Am I getting this right?
Oh no, sorry.
Isn't
I thought you were
Pyongyang?
talking about
Pyongyang.
I thought you were talking about in Thailand.
Yeah, Big Bang in Pyongyang.
Gotcha. Okay,
Right.
cool. Yep.
So he took Dennis Rodman, who is the sort of flamboyant, highly jewelled, tattooed, drunken NBA star, who was admired by Kim Jong-un, who's an amazing golfer. Apparently got 18 holes in one.
Yeah, I did hear about this. Yeah.
And has a nuclear arsenal.
He's a nuclear arsehole.
And so Colin went over there with Dennis Rodman and filmed him singing "Happy Birthday" to
Oh shit, that was
such
him.
a weird friendship.
It was such
Dennis
a
Rodman,
way
Kim
out
Jong-un
there.
thing.
Because I mean, North Korea doesn't allow much media in.
Nah.
And so if you do get access there, it's like, you know it's going to be controlled. So he was just like, let's just film everything we can do. And
Totally.
I saw that, and he said, Rusty, I'd love you and Thomas to come back into San Pedro prison to film a documentary called Wildlands. And I was like, I will do that on the condition that, you nor the producers nor the financiers control the questions that I ask. You guys can cut it however you want, but I'm not going to be controlled in terms of what I say and what the questions I ask.
Yeah.
And it was, like my greatest achievements in my life, if I can put it bluntly, marching powder, living in a prison for 4 months, voluntarily, meeting Thomas McFadden, amazing guy, and then working for the US government for 4 years, writing this next book, Colombiano. Those are amazing experiences, but Wildlands was possibly the wildest 5 months of my life. And
really?
And big thanks to, oh my God, wait till this comes out. I mean, you guys have seen the pre-edit. Mm-hmm. Can't talk about it because it hasn't been released. It's been slightly censored. But yeah, look, I mean, that was incredible. I mean, as an individual, I look for people who can change my lives. Who can change my life. It's happened to me twice in a big way. It happens to me every day, actually. I talk to every taxi driver. I talk to people in the airport. I just talk to hotel receptionists. I talk to everyone.
Yeah.
But the biggest changes in my life in terms of like career direction have been Thomas McFadden. I'm a white, middle-class lawyer. Mm-hmm. I met a black drug trafficker in a prison in Bolivia. And I go, bang, you're a fucking cool guy. Yeah. I'm going to go and live with you and write a book, write a bestseller. Changes my life, changes his life. I met a guy coming through an airport. Can't mention the guy's name. He's a very humble guy. He became my mentor. And he changed my life. He gave me a job with the US government that changed my perspective on the world and allowed me to write this next book. And I'd say the other coincidental meeting I had was with Colin Offland, and he just said, you know what, why don't you present and narrate this documentary? And I would do that stuff for free. There was a lot of hard work involved, but he was an amazing person to work with. His whole crew was amazing to work with. And I think what we came out with was, although it's been diluted by international pressure.
That's so crazy. Look, I can't say. I can't say it.
I just want to say
it.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, I got just an interesting question about a documentary like that. How much can you a documentary like Wildlands? And like I said, I haven't seen it. Tom, you've seen it, but like a
I've seen it twice. I've jacked off to about 50 times. Raw documentary filmed and shot in 5 months in Latin America.
Yeah.
How much is the production cost of something like that? Do we know?
I have no idea. So I wasn't on the production side. But I mean,
would you have a guess? What do you? I'm just actually genuinely interested. This is a question I could ask after the show.
Yeah.
I'm going to say under $1 million, but hundreds of thousands of dollars for sure. Think about this. If you want to do something professionally, you've got the camera gear. And those cameras are probably each camera's probably worth $100,000. Yeah. You've got to fly a line producer, a director, a presenter, narrator, the talent. Yep. You've got to have at least 2 camera guys, but preferably 3. You've got to have a sound guy. And so you've got 7 or 8 people minimum traveling around the world, staying in hotels, eating, for however many weeks that it requires. And plus you've got to pay your fixers, you've got to pay your talent maybe.
Pay the government.
I mean, it's an expensive enterprise
for sure.
But the good news is that documentaries are undergoing a renaissance. Because previously documentaries, you'd try and do a sort of guerrilla documentary, you try and get it released in the cinemas. And that's your income. Yeah, that's your box office. You tick your box office
you make any
income.
Money.
That's how you make money. But now with Netflix and with iTunes and Google Play and Amazon, all these platforms allow documentaries just to sit there and tick over. You might get $1 a download, and that makes it worthwhile. So I think there's a huge interest. The internet has been amazing. Has represented an absolute boon for documentary makers. Yeah. I
like the reason I asked is because for our trips we have coming up, we have a photo video team that I've built, which is going to be really good. But I want to, with AdventureFit, start doing documentaries, but small documentaries. I love the media side of what we do. I really love this, telling stories. Like, this is why your story has nothing to do with adventure, fitness, or travel. Well, travel it does, but this is like what I like to do. So I like the Vice style of documentaries. You know how you can get a really interesting documentary and get it in 12 minutes?
Yeah.
So that's probably more like to what we would probably do.
Yeah.
But that's why I was kind of asking, because I feel like there's so many interesting stories to tell out there that you can tell whether it is a long form, you know, a BAFTA awarded, you know, Cannes Film Award documentary like the stuff that you're doing, or whether it's like a Vice, which Vice is one of the biggest media companies in the world, but a Vice style, you know, 8 to 12 minute documentary. Because, just with the people that we talk to, obviously, the places that we go, there's so many fucking
Every guest
interesting.
blows my mind.
There's so many fucking interesting stories.
So, but
I love this.
what a great position you guys are in, by
It's
the
the
way.
best.
That
It's great,
your
man.
job and your passion, and hopefully the way you're making money is going out and meeting people who inspire you, you know, in
That's
different
the
ways.
best.
Every single
great.
guest blows
Wow,
my
that's
mind.
awesome.
literally.
So as I said, I've had 2 people who've blown my mind and changed the direction of my life. But you guys are going out and looking for that, and so to my mind, you're in the zone of happiness, because you're looking for new ways of looking at the world.
Yeah,
exactly
that's
right.
right.
Yeah, well, I mean, the biggest thing I love about this thing is the fact that, I mean, number one, we're working in inverted commas on a Saturday night, drinking beers with a fucking, legend of it.
Who's paying you though, right?
Well, I mean,
No one right now.
yeah, no one right now. Yeah, off
The
record.
podcast isn't making money right now.
Yeah,
Is the short answer to the question.
We hope it will one day, but even if it doesn't, if we can just fund it, this is the
But
shit
it
we love
costs you
doing.
nothing as well. Look at the setup to a podcast.
It costs us a little bit.
Yeah.
but-
Transport, petrol.
Yeah,
we get it put together in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Costs us a couple $100 a week.
But
a few
Bill,
$100 a week.
who paid for the 6-pack?
That's true.
Yeah, well, there you go. We're already paying ourselves back, mate.
Six-pack's made in the
I'm
kitchen,
supposed
mate.
to be the talent here.
No, but we lost a few. We lost.
I should not have to pay for my own alcohol.
And he gave us a glass of wine before as well.
I'm Bill Cosby. I want to have sex with lots of.
With the people.
This is definitely the weirdest tangent we've gone
Yeah,
on.
this has gone down. We're talking about Bill Cosby now.
Cosby.
He's a very, very well-mannered man.
Bill, I want to say to you that I really like you, not only as people but also as attractive men.
No. Let's go.
So, getting away from Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
Rusty Young does not support any of the above comments.
Batteries not included. What was it like to interview and almost befriend Carl? Is it Jung? Sorry, Carl Jung.
George Young.
George Young.
So you're confusing that with the whole existentialist.
I was there.
Yes.
Bill Cosby, you just got me rattled. I just got nervous.
George Young was the one of
So
the.
who's George Young? Sorry,
George
Russ?
Young.
Yeah, tell us about the documentary.
George Young.
Tell us about that documentary, and then maybe into
Summary.
sorry,
So we're going to do the Wildlands one.
Do the Wildlands, and then we'll go.
So Rusty, we were sitting down earlier and watching Wildlands, obviously, which is your new doco you got coming out. So, your question was about George Young, but tell us about what Wildlands, or what is Wildlands about the story that you're trying to tell in the
Well,
doco?
essentially, it's like a journey through South America and the USA, looking at the history of the war on drugs. I interview a whole bunch of legends of the wildlands. So that was the initial title. It's called Wildlands, but it's about legends of the wildlands. So legends could be interpreted as being either the people who are the legends or the stories of the legends. And so I interviewed Thomas McFadden. We actually went back into San Pedro prison 15 years later. He freaked the hell out. That was the first story. I interviewed George Young, who was portrayed by Johnny Depp in the movie Blow, who played alongside Penelope Cruz. Amazing movie from 1996 about the history of the importation of cocaine into USA, into West USA, and I interviewed a bunch of undercover DEA agents who sort of survived, some DEA informants. Interviewed a guy called Adam Newbold, who was amazing. That was a real insight for me. He was a member of the Navy SEAL Team 6, which was the team that brought down Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, wow.
And he wasn't there during the operation, but he was part of that team. And those guys go through that. That's one of the most, if not the most amazing, extreme elite teams on planet Earth.
100%.
And these guys do
That's
everything.
the top dogs.
These are the top dogs.
Osama bin Laden. He's your best man on the job.
Yeah. So you'd think that these guys would just be brainwashed, sort of grunts.
Robots.
But he was incredibly intelligent and rounded and really responsive and engaging, and he was incredible.
Was he emotionally intuitive?
Absolutely. I mean,
Really?
he was just. I was just sitting there going, I can't like. Everyone else, I was there to just kind of bring them down a bit, my interview style is a little bit aggressive. You guys are just chilled out, but my interview is like, I'm going to try and get under your skin. That's my style.
Well, we had that before. You were like, probe me on my happiness. I was getting nervous.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not happy anymore.
Yeah. And if I kept going, if I interviewed you guys for an hour, you'd end up
Being assaulted.
Crying on the floor.
We've got to do the opposite of a show one day,
I'd
man.
love to do that.
That'd be
Give me a
sick.
pisser.
You're on the reverse podcast with Rusty.
Yeah. Rusty Fit. Oh, radio.
Probably one of your
tried
worst
to
ones
say-
ever.
I tried to say radio backwards, but I couldn't say it.
The other guy in that interview series was a guy called John Jairo Vasquez, and he was Pablo Escobar's supposed chief assassin. He'd admitted to killing 250 people and ordering the deaths of 3,000 people. He'd just been out of prison, and I interviewed him about life in the day of the Medellin cartel. Another incredible woman called Pilar Angel, who was the wife of one of the members of the cartels in Colombia, and then when she was finally caught up with by the DEA, she flipped sides and started working as a money launderess, and then she was working for the DEA, going back and busting her former husband's colleagues in drug trafficking, and she was laundering money for the DEA. The DEA was actually taking a commission out of money laundering whilst trying to capture the cartel. So it becomes, in moral sense, it becomes a sort of very murky waters. But Wildlands is essentially just delving into the personal histories of people who had been involved in the drug trade during the golden era of the drug trade. Obviously, the drug trade has changed significantly. It's become increasingly violent. But the people back in the heyday, the 80s and the 90s.
So, okay, no worries. So, with the drug trade and the war on drugs and what you've learnt from, obviously, this documentary and just your history in the area, like, what do you actually think about the war on drugs? Do you think it's been
a dramatic failure. I mean, it started in 1971 with Nixon declaring the war on drugs, and then around 1973, I think
wasn't it Nixon that was supposed to be working with the Nicaraguan president bringing cocaine into the US, or
no? You're getting it confused with Oliver North, but
yeah, I'll just shut up then. Yeah, no, seriously, I don't know what I'm talking about. So I should just let Rusty talk.
1971 was Nixon declaring the war on drugs. 1973 was the creation of the DEA, and so we're now 2017. The latest statistics from Colombia are that coca leaf production, as in the base ingredient of cocaine, is at an all-time high. That cocaine consumption in the Western countries is at an all-time high. So if you compare 1971 to 2017. Cocaine production has increased, cocaine consumption has increased. In other words, if you were looking at a war on drugs, it has failed. It has failed.
Per capita, though, because the US has gone up like 1,000%.
It has failed completely.
1,000% in the US. But my question though, like, is it do you mean per capita, like more people taking drugs? Because the US has gone from like 100 million to 350 million in that time.
Good point if you want to measure like relative population levels, but certainly if we look at the number of deaths and how many people die per year, and this is a question that's never introduced, how many people die per year from drug overdoses, whether it be cocaine or heroin or marijuana.
Prescription medication, just to throw a spanner.
So right now, the US, and this is according to the DA, is in the grip of the highest ever opioid addiction. So opioids are used as painkillers, prescription medication, and it's also a gateway drug to heroin. So when people are given as a first line defense painkillers, there's some amazingly powerful drugs which are actually more powerful than heroin. And once patients are given this drug and then taken off the drug, they go, well, where can I get that same hit? And they start taking heroin. So heroin deaths have actually quadrupled in the US. So they're going through an absolute epidemic right now in the US for opioid addiction. boosted by the pharmaceutical companies. How many people die per year from cocaine addiction versus how many people die in the war on drugs? In the last 4 years, an estimated 150,000 Mexican citizens have died along the border areas, not from taking drugs, but because of being caught up in the battlefield for the war of the control of the cocaine market. So there are far, far more human beings, lives being lost in the battle over the profits than over the actual from actually taking the drug. So so when you start going, what is the war on drugs? What are we trying to achieve here? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be persecuting drugs and drug consumption as a social evil. Drugs can be extremely dangerous. They're very addictive. Cocaine, is not a positive thing in the long term at all.
No.
And yet, if we're looking at the sort of cost balance and the cost to the taxpayer, it's a ridiculous situation whereby which, on one hand, we're using our tax-paying dollar to prosecute the war on drugs. On the other hand, we're using our after-tax dollar as Western consumers to buy that very same drug. And the fact of the matter is that because of the war on drugs, drug prices rise, and then therefore it becomes more glamorous. So it's this kind of contradictory, almost hypocritical situation whereby Western countries are saying, we're gonna be happy to go out on a Friday or a Saturday night and do a few lines of coke in the bathroom. That's kind of cool because it's expensive. And at the same time go, let's make the South Americans and the Latin Americans and the Central Americans pay this incredibly high price in terms of blood and corruption for this war on drugs.
Yeah.
Do you think legalizing drugs is the answer in this because I mean, at the end of the day, let's say for example, drugs right now are all illegal, and is anyone ever stopped from taking drugs because they're illegal right now? Like, have you ever?
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
I've never been.
Okay, but it limits your access. So you have, let's say, as someone who's interested in experimenting, and let's look at the definition of a drug is a mind-altering substance. And what, in terms of your available options right now on a Saturday night, alcohol's freely available. We can walk out into a bar.
Yeah.
Tobacco is now more limited in its availability, but 20 years ago it wasn't. At one stage in history, coffee was actually illegal. Tobacco was illegal. Alcohol's been illegal under the American Constitution. So all these mind-altering substances, we've always had this sort of dilemma about how do we control?
What's safe?
How do we achieve the optimal balance? Cocaine's highly illegal. Heroin's highly illegal. But let's look at those two drugs versus ice. And the ice has surely been the biggest plague on Australian society in the last 10 or 20 years, hasn't it? I mean,
definitely,
100%.
Right,
100%. But so, I still feel like there's like you say with the lives lost in the war on drugs.
Yeah.
Because if there's no war on drugs, then there's no loss of life. If there's no war on drugs, then there's no So you talk about big pharma that are making all this money, getting people hooked on painkillers and so forth, the epidemic that's going on in America.
Yep.
If you take, and I mean, the money would be going to big corporations, but if you take away the illegality of it, then all these drugs become cleaner. They become readily available. They come from
including regulation as well.
Yeah, they come from big pharma. And I mean, the positives of, the one thing that I've heard when in this question that is the rebuttal is, well, what do the gangsters do then? They're going to find something else, which is fine. I mean, if they're
still going to do bad things.
People are going to be bad people. But if you take away all that amazing amount of money going into the wrong people's hands,
but not just the wrong people, we're talking about criminal organisations and we're talking about terrorist organisations. So to my mind,
right.
Essentially what we're going to eventually face is which is worse, terrorism or drug consumption or drug trafficking, because the most lucrative and immediate and easiest form of financing for international terrorist organisations is drug trafficking, because it's a high profit margin. The Colombian FARC, the Colombian paramilitaries were two of the wealthiest terrorist organisations. Taliban is funded by opium. Right? In Afghanistan. In fact, the war stops when they're not producing opium because they need to actually get their crops out in order to fund their next season's campaign.
Yeah.
So if we want to stop these terrorist organisations who are killing people with car bombs and kidnapping people and murdering people and murdering politicians, what if you took the financing away? That doesn't mean that there's never going to be another terrorist organisation. There's always going to be social injustice and poverty. That's part of humanity. But don't make it easy for them.
Yeah.
Flip side, there are plenty of arguments like what happens if you do legalise it and you make it more accessible, you make it more acceptable. There are some dangers because guess what? These drugs have been made illegal for a reason. The very first cocaine addicts were actually ophthalmologists. So they were looking for an analgesic for eye surgery. So the eye actually contains one of the highest concentration of nerve endings in the human body. And so they've never actually worked out a way to actually operate physically on an eye. And then they used a liquid cocaine to actually provide painkiller as a painkiller. And then the ophthalmologist was like, oh, here's one drop for you. And here's one drop for
One
me.
for you, one for me, one for you.
At a certain point, ophthalmologists and also physicians and psychophysicians such as Sigmund Freud. Freud was actually a big advocate. Sigmund Freud was the father of modern psychology. Was actually a big advocate for cocaine use. And he was also a massive cocaine addict. And he actually recommended to his best friend end up retracting his position because his best friend became so addicted he went crazy.
Freud.
Yeah. And the book Jekyll and Hyde, The Strange Tale of the... was actually written about someone who was a cocaine addict.
Yeah. And that's all 100% valid. I think with legalization though, if a government says, okay, we're going to legalize this thing, then I mean, obviously the fact that it's going to be more readily available, does that really mean more people are going to get addicted and going to die? Or does it mean that the drugs are going to be cleaner? There's going to be safe injecting rooms. There's going to be...
Because you're saying people are going to find drugs irrespective.
Yeah, that's right. Irrespective. But the government won't just go out and gung-ho. Okay, all drugs are free. Get them off your mates.
Right.
Fucking down behind the sheds.
But let me provide the counter perspective here.
Yeah.
Okay, so right now we're in Melbourne. You go out and you pay $300 and you don't get pure drugs. You get shithouse Panadol.
Yeah.
Right? So you go, well, I'm now turned off doing it. There's no point in doing it because I'm just going to get Panadol, which has been crushed up and it's dangerous and it's mixed with stuff. So you go, well, that's not really an option. But let's say the government goes, here's some pure cocaine. That's a really good high.
Yeah.
You might actually go, that's a pretty good option. So that's one of the... There are many dangers and pitfalls for legalising, but...
But that doesn't take into account the regulation process associated
so how would you regulate it?
Well, I'm just thinking of like a... Well, I don't have the answers, but like maybe, I don't know, how. Yeah. I mean I think cigarettes aren't. I mean, cigarettes it would have to be more regulated than that, obviously. Like, I mean, cigarettes, you can go out and buy 20 packs if you wanted to. With cocaine, I mean, maybe gun regulation is a system they'd probably be willing to undertake. I don't think background checks and it's...
Yeah, I don't think you go, look, you can only buy X amount of drugs. Like, you can go and kill yourself with beer right now. We can go buy
you
a
can't
bottle
kill yourself with beer. How do you kill yourself with beer?
Not beer, but sorry.
Killing yourself with beer.
But you can kill yourself anyway.
I can smash you over the head with a bottle. But
yeah, you can drink yourself to death. We can go grab a bottle of...
But I might.
We can go grab a bottle of whiskey right now, scull it and die. Like my friend Gav died, drunk himself to death 5 years ago.
But like, would you see more frequent cases with drugs that are potentially more aggressive?
I don't think so.
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
You would, and then the media would come out and go, man who was high on cocaine or whatever, who was taking a legally prescribed substance, kills a family on a pedestrian crossing. Drugs are evil. Have we been doing the same thing for alcohol? I mean, alcohol is still involved in over 50% of
alcohol's the worst drug out there.
Road fatalities. Well, is it the worst drug ever? Let's be objective here as well. You guys have had a beer tonight. I've had a beer tonight. And it's something which allows you, it's a social lubricant. It allows you to relax. So when the majority of people use alcohol as a responsible citizen and relax and have fun, have a good laugh, make them relax, is that a bad thing? Have we killed anyone?
No, that's right.
So it's only in extreme use. So how do you control the extreme use versus the responsible use?
Well, people have to do that's on people. But people are going to still go out and get addicted to heroin. People are going to kill themselves on ice. People are going to drink themselves to death, and that's people's.
But it's also it's not just on people, man. Like it's also on like the way the way society was rounded towards that drug. I mean, like if you look in Eastern European societies where age has no limitation, and kids are brought up in sort of, you know, families where it's like, yeah, you have a glass of this, a glass of that. I mean, just kids in here when they're 18 years old getting absolutely fucked up every weekend is just not a thing over there because it's just a different way of drinking or introducing
different
a drug.
cultural way that they
Colombia,
deal with it.
in Colombia, I
Sure.
very rarely saw people getting so drunk that they get into fight. In fact, I reckon in Colombia, even though it's the most, you know, it was like had one of the highest murder rates in the world, I never saw punch-ups on a Friday night, whereas Australians will have a punch-up, but you don't see them shooting each other.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, a lot of it does come down to cultural. Should we wrap this up now, though?
Yeah, for sure. Well,
yes. Well, should we go 6 from 6?
we're done 6 to 6.
I think we've changed we've changed nearly all the questions.
We could speak for another 4 hours. Let's just go and speak for another 4 hours.
Joe Rogan. We're on the
Dude, what the fuck?
We're on the McGregor Mayweather fight tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Man weather.
All right, Rusty, we're going to go to 6 from 6 then. Yep. I think we did 9 from 9 back in the day, but all the questions have changed.
6 to 6.
Oh, it was,
just me and
wasn't it?
you.
Yeah, that's right. So, Rusty, my first question, you may have already answered it, we really can't remember. Your favourite travel destination you've ever been and why?
Colombia.
He has answered this one.
He has done
Dream
this.
destination.
Colombia.
Somewhere you haven't been.
Adelaide.
Somewhere you haven't been.
I want to go to Nepal next.
Nepal.
I want to go with you guys.
Cool. Yeah, we haven't done all these questions.
We've done these. We'll do them again.
Yeah.
Favourite book?
My last question is book that you like to recommend to people. Can be autobiography, can be a graphic novel,
The
can be
Catcher
anything.
in the Rye by J.D. Salinger.
Really?
Yeah, just it's a first-person narrative, well, particularly for boys. I mean, maybe not so much for women, but you know, it's like about the feelings of adolescent insecurity, and you know, it kind of makes you feel that everything you're going through, you're okay. Yeah, it was a really comforting book for me.
Cool.
Russ, what do you like to do in your spare time?
I like to jog, and my favourite pastime is kite surfing.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you say that last time?
Yeah, he did.
I don't even remember that.
No, he did. I remember it well.
I'm pretty consistent.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Catch the Rolls, dude. Catch the Rolls.
Yeah, that was
Sorry to anyone that's listening to the show and just getting the same answers to the same questions.
Someone you look up to? Inspiration?
I'm going to say my Year 7 English teacher, Michael Boylan, who got me writing a diary, and the guy, I won't say his name, who I met in the plane.
Yep.
And my parents as well. My parents have just been amazing sort of mentors for me.
Your parents are legends. We love them. We've met them personally.
Yeah.
They're lovely people. I remember your dad was sipping a cup of coffee, I believe, in the morning.
Would have been red wine.
Would have been red wine. Yeah. There was some white powder on the top there, man. I don't know what it was, but must have been painted up. And 3 people to dinner, dead or alive. Who would they be and why,
we
Russ?
did this one. I think I might have got pulled up on this one.
Yeah, this is a tough one.
I'm going to say Charles Bukowski.
Good bloke.
He
Obviously
was
the stripper.
an author.
Yep.
Who else? Someone else has died. I'd like Hitler to be there. I'd just punch him in the fucking head.
Yeah.
Hitler's
or
the
would you
most
want to
common guest
pick
we
his
have.
brain a bit?
No,
Just want to punch him.
Just eliminate him.
Well, I mean that would get
He's already
through the
eliminated
entree,
that.
but what about
He's
the
already
dinner?
eliminated. We're not having this meal in 1910. We're not going back into the past.
Yeah.
Oh, I said he's coming to dinner right now.
He's come back.
Well, we
and
can
he's
bring
come-
him back.
He's coming forward to the
Everything's
future.
done.
forward, yeah.
Everything's done.
It's all done.
Yeah, you can't reverse
Yeah, okay.
the
I'd still like
path
him to
history.
come forward and I'll still punch him in the head.
Fair enough. But then would you want to invite him to dinner?
No,
Bang.
just I would only have like 2 plates and he wouldn't be one of us.
He's the
him
most
over the
popular guest we have on that question.
Really?
Yeah.
Yep. Everyone
I
wants to
guess
know
it's
about
someone
Hitler.
who just like evokes an extreme emotion, you know.
Totally.
Well, most people want to pick his brain. You're the first person that's going to
And,
just pop him one.
Rip him in the foot.
I'm going to say Angelina Jolie. I know she's not dead, but fuck.
She doesn't have to be dead, mate. She doesn't have to be dead.
He goes, but fuck. That's unreal.
If she was dead, she'd be good.
Mate. Exactly. Oh,
Put a bit
shit.
morbid there.
Russ, and finally, mate, this is not a part of the 6 and 6, but now's the time to plug anything upcoming, your social medias, anything to get out there for all the listeners. Go for it, mate.
Mate, I just want to plug you guys. You've been awesome.
Bang, I like it. Adventure Radio. In case you haven't already heard us or listened to us, Adventure Radio. I love it.
All right, cool. All the stuff will be in the show notes for everybody, and yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks again, Rusty, for a great round number 2.
Pussy Young.
Pussy young pussy. We all
Young
love
pussy.
that. Oh no, we're not going to go there. All right, that's a wrap. Alrighty, thanks for listening, guys. If you enjoyed that one, make sure you go ahead and subscribe. If you didn't enjoy it, go ahead and subscribe. If you already are a subscriber, guys, please go and leave us a rating and review. Also, head to www.adventuretravel.com/radio for all the show notes. So anything that we mentioned in the show, there'll be links to in the show notes. And don't forget to check out audibletrial.com/ADVF radio. You'll get one free audiobook and a 30-day subscription there. Use the code word radio when you go to quashcreatives.com and speak with the team down there. You'll get a free SEO report or report on your current or existing brand. And adventurefittravel.com, 10% off any and all holidays using the code word radio. Radio, see you next week.
Discovery Roger, go for deploy.